Welcome to the Literature Cafe. Today we are going to explore two main critiques of Marx that question the relevance of his theory. The first critique suggests that Marx's Capital fails to explain the service sector, making it less applicable in today's economy, and the second critique argues that his theory is outdated, mainly describing England in the 19th century. So let's begin with the first critique. It's often claimed that services play no role in Marx's framework and that he focuses on commodities, which are tangible products. And as a result, critics argue that Marx couldn't account for the development of capitalism beyond the 19th century, including the rise of our so-called service economy. However, this interpretation of Marx might not be entirely accurate, because in the beginning of Capital, where he discusses commodities, Marx indeed states the wealth of societies in which the capitalist mode of production prevails appears as a gigantic collection of commodities. And the singular commodity appears as the elementary form of wealth. Our investigation accordingly begins with the analysis of the commodity. Initially, he refers to commodities as things or commodity bodies, suggesting that only physical products are considered. Yet, he later clarifies that his definition is not limited to material production and includes services like education, which can be also capitalistic commodities. And the status of a commodity, according to Marx, depends not on its physical attributes, but on the social context in which it is produced and exchanged. For instance, a cake isn't a commodity if it's baked at home for personal consumption or as a gift. However, if it is baked in a cake shop for sale, it becomes a commodity satisfying the needs of others and bought and sold in the market. Thus, Marx's analysis applies equally to services as it does to material goods. And the fact that a taxi ride or a call center consultation is not tangible does not change its commodity nature. So, a taxi ride meets a person's need to move from point A to point B and is traded on the market. And the primary difference between tangible goods and services lies in the consumption process. So goods like cakes are consumed after their production, so they are baked and sold and finally eaten. And in contrast, taxi ride is consumed in tandem with its production. And therefore, Marx doesn't just define commodities, but also emphasizes the social form of production throughout his work. Because Marx's key argument is that the capitalist mode of production reshapes not only the nature of products, but also the relationships and roles of those involved in production. And this transformation extends beyond the material production of goods to services, which are similarly shaped by capitalist relations. So this focus is essential for addressing his central question, which is what fundamentally constitutes capitalism, and differentiates his analysis from other economists of his era. Because indeed, while products fulfilling needs, labor, and the lending of money at interest exist across various societies, it's the specific social forms that production, exchange, and money take under capitalism and how society is organized under these conditions that are central to Marx's work. And if we ignore the social form question, a cake remains just a cake, whether in the Middle Ages or under capitalism. Let's now examine the next critique, often mentioned in discussions about Marx's seminal work, Capital. Critics argue that while Marx insightfully analyzed the dynamics of 19th century English capitalism, his theories may not apply to the present day. So they point out that Marx did not witness the evolution of capitalism that includes the rise of digitalized production or complex financial products. Also, Jonathan Sperber notably remarked, I would not regard Marx as our contemporary, but rather as a figure from a bygone historical epoch. But how valid is this criticism? Indeed, Marx wrote his work in the 19th century while he was deeply immersed in the economic conditions of London. And the book is filled with examples that specifically reference England, giving some the impression that his analysis is confined to that context. However, Marx's intention was not to describe a historically specific phase of capitalism restricted to England in the 19th century. Instead, he aimed for a broader analysis. And also, early in the preface to the first volume, he sets out his goal, where he writes, "In this work, I have to examine the capitalist mode of production and the conditions of production and exchange corresponding to that mode." Marx uses England as the primary illustration not because it was unique, but because it was then the epitome of capitalist development. And one example that illustrates this point is an explanation of financial market bubbles based on Marx's theories, which contrast starkly with mainstream economic perspectives. According to mainstream economics, as exemplified, for instance, by Eugene Fama, who was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2013, such bubbles simply do not exist. And Fama famously declared, "There are no bubbles in the market." And this assertion likely stems from the neoclassical theory which he supports and its inability to account for such phenomena. So the logic here is straightforward. If a phenomenon does not exist within the theory, then it cannot exist within the reality. And in contrast, Marx offers a different explanation. He posits that the capital advanced by a company, whether through loans, bonds, or stocks, not only represents real capital in production, but also exists in the form of title of ownership. And this title grants the holder a claim to interests and amortization of dividends. And such claims and the underlying securities are tradable. So the price of these securities are based on the trust in future profits and are thus relatively independent of the actual production. And in the event of bankruptcy, it is not just the invested real capital that is destroyed, it's also the value of these securities that are plummet. And when this scenario occurs simultaneously across numerous companies in a supposedly profitable sector like real estate or also internet companies, this is what is referred to as bubble bursting. And through the lens of Marx analysis, significantly more can be explained than with the prevailing economic theories. And therefore, Capital goes beyond detailing the peculiarities of English capitalism, and Marx is more concerned with uncovering the characteristics, the mechanisms, and the economic interrelations that define capitalism in its core. And his insights are relevant in any context where capitalist production is predominant. This also means his analysis remains pertinent unless the capitalist mode of production ceases to be dominant. And it's also crucial to discern whether Marx might have conflated particular historical characteristics of 19th century England with the general traits of capitalism. But his theory provides still a vital framework for understanding contemporary economic phenomena. Although Marx did not explore every facet of financial capital, his theoretical foundation allows for further investigation into these areas using his analytical tools. So this was what Marx might say about these critiques. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.